Welcome, everyone. This is Danny Haiphong, and we are coming to you with, unfortunately, a sad episode of the Left Lens live with co-host Margaret Kimberley here with me. Let me know if you hear us. I don't see anyone. Okay, now I think we're on. So, yeah, we're here, of course, to pay tribute to Glenn Ford, and I got up some brief remarks as soon as it happened because I was reeling. But I guess just start, Margaret. Do you want to kick us off a bit just to talk about this very unfortunate passing of Glenn Ford, and we're
Yes,
gonna bring in Jemima Pierre, Dr. Jemima Pierre, as soon as she's available. But we wanted to come on with you a little early just to introduce and talk about this. So, Margaret, do you want to?
sure. She
Oh, oh no. Can y'all hear us? I don't hear anyone. Okay. I don't hear Margaret. Did she disconnect? Can anyone confirm that with me? She's frozen on my screen. How am I? Yes. Okay. uh, Margaret is frozen. Okay. Well, hello everyone. Margaret will fix her issues, I'm sure. Oh, Margaret, you're back. Okay.
yes, I am. Sorry, but I don't know what happened.
No, I
Um,
think he just froze. Maybe internet. I don't know.
I did. Okay. Yes, Glenn Ford passed away yesterday, July 28th, 2021, after a long illness. It's a devastating loss to us personally. As his friends and comrades, he was my mentor. I knew him for nearly 20 years. Whatever I've achieved, like being here tonight, is because of Glenn and Black Agenda Report. And same is true for Danny. He was a great journalist. He's what a journalist ought to be. Getting paid to write and broadcast does not make one a journalist. He investigated, he analyzed. He did not care if his analysis pointed away from the establishment narrative. In fact, he never put forth the establishment narrative. As a man who was a socialist, who was a Black nationalist in the best meaning of that word. He was always, always, always concerned with the condition of African people around the world, always. And he and I and Bruce Dixon co-founded Black Agenda Report in 2006. And sadly, now they have both passed away. We had scheduled last week or so this conversation with Dr. Jemima Pierre, who will be joining us shortly, not knowing that it would be the day after we lost Glenn Ford. But we were scheduled to talk about Haiti, and we will. That was one of the things that Glenn did much, much better than anybody in the corporate media, reporting on Haiti, the things that people ought to know, but don't know. And so we said we were still going to go forward, even though it's been a rough time since yesterday morning when we found out Glenn was gone. We're forging ahead. We are still going to talk about Haiti. We'll talk about Glenn's legacy as a reporter. And that's just one part of the world where he educated so many people in ways that the corporate media, people who make a lot of money, actually people make a lot of money because they don't tell the truth. And that is, even if you didn't know Glenn, that's why his passing is such a loss to people on the left, to people in independent media, left media, to anyone who is concerned with liberation struggles. Glenn's passing is a very big loss for us all.
Yeah, indeed it is. Indeed it is. It's a very big loss. I'm still am definitely processing it. I had the privilege. I mean, I feel like one of the luckiest people on this earth to be able to have moved here to New York City and been able to get to know Glen better, to be able to learn from him up close and personal. Oh, I see Dr. Jemima Pierre there. I just want to say one thing before I bring her on that I think is very important, because I know that we are all imperfect human beings. We all have our flaws. We all navigate the contradictions of this system. And for sure, Glen Ford did not please everybody. And he was someone whose ideas, especially his ideas, they were anathema to many people. I'm not even just talking about the establishment, but many people on the left saw him as going too far, as someone who overly criticized Barack Obama, as someone who was too socialist, too communist, too anti-imperialist, ultra left, right? There were so many people who felt like this and still to this day harbor a lot of resentments. And it's quite obvious. And I want to just say that in times like this, when one of our comrades fall, we have to be bigger than ourselves. We have to realize that, no matter how close we were to Glen, what always matters was the contributions that people make to this struggle. And Glen Ford made innumerable contradictions, so many sacrifices. I don't think people realize that Glen Ford could have literally been a multimillionaire, a black media mogul. He was a pioneer in black journalism. He did not need to sacrifice as much as he did with the talents that he was able to develop over the course of his life history. And yet what he did was sacrifice all of them for the people, to provide people, oppressed people, black people, all people who are fighting against injustice anywhere, with tools to be able to analyze and see the world and see conditions for what they are, so that they can then pick up the mantle and change it. And I just want that to be how people remember Glen Ford, regardless of whatever people thought about him individually, and however people may have viewed his politics. That, to me, is his greatest contribution and gift. But with all that said, I want to bring in Dr. Jemima Pierre, because she was so generous to give us her time. And here she is. Hi, Dr. Pierre. How are you? Oh, I think you're muted. I can unmute you. There you go. No.
There you go.
There you go.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi. How you all doing?
Uh,
Are we live?
We are live. We are live.
Okay.
Yeah.
As good as can be expected, I guess. It's been too long, though. I know the last time I saw you for the left forum many years ago. So.
I have the picture.
I know, it was a beautiful.
Oh yeah,
picture.
was that 2017 or
2017, and I
Okay.
have to show you all because it's such a great picture, and all of us were there.
Yeah, that's us.
Glen,
Danny.
Yeah,
me,
and I think
Glen and Margaret. Yes.
And it was unfortunate Bruce couldn't make it that year. I think he was
He was
out. Yeah, he was sick in Georgia, and I was so looking forward for everyone. I felt like for the last 5 years we weren't able to, a few years we weren't able to all get together. But beautiful, good times, very good times. Anyway, well, you're here, Dr. Pierre. We were just going to talk about Haiti, but these are hard times with the passing of Glen. So give us your thoughts, any remarks you want to make to just open.
Yeah, I hope I don't cry. I am so devastated. Oh my God, Glen means so much to me, and to you all, I'm sure. And I'm just gutted. I'm gutted because I think that voice is irreplaceable. And I've never, I learned so much, and I was so honored to be published in the Black Agenda report. And this is my first, and I have to give this story because I met Glen about 12 years ago. About 11 years ago, right after the earthquake in Haiti. And I'd gone to Haiti, and I went to so I was presenting with Kevin Alexander Gray, if you all remember this name.
Yes,
In the left forum. That's when I met you too, Margaret. And then I was, so I was been reading Black Agenda Report because I was so disillusioned during the 2007, 2000 run up to the 2008 elections. And I thought I was going crazy because it was Obama mania. And I was so devastated, and I had no one to read. And then I read an essay by Kevin, and then I was reading a lot on Black Agenda Report, just challenging Obama. And that was the only place I felt like I was safe, because everyone else around me was crazy. Yep. And so then, Kevin and I kept in touch, and we went to Haiti after the earthquake, and we wrote about the earthquake from Haiti. We had a piece in The Nation. And then we decided, and then we were invited to present at the Left Forum. And then I saw that Margaret and Glen were going to present. So I said, Kevin, you have to introduce me, and that's what happened, I was just like, just starting out as an academic. And so I wasn't even thinking about writing op-eds, but I was reading you all the time. I was reading the Black Commentator beforehand. Yep. And so Kevin, we had lunch. I don't know, Margaret, if you remember this was like 11 years ago. We had lunch. And then I kept in touch with Glen in particular, because we were in New York again. And then, of course, Glen, my partner and I and Glen would meet and have drinks, a lot of drinks at a bar in New York and talk. And one of those days, I was just like, man, what's happening in Haiti is terrible. And it was right after Hillary Clinton forced this election and then forced Martelly on the people. And this is like late 2010, early 2011. And he's like, well, why don't you just write about it? And I'm like, well, I don't know how to write like that. I'm an academic. And so he said, all you need, I'll never forget this advice. He said, all you need is a hook and 800 words. And so that was that. And he's like, why don't you go and try it? A hook and 800 words. And so I went, and and if you see that first article, it's about the elections in Haiti, the Hillary Clinton choosing Martelly. And I still have like footnotes, like it's an academic article. I didn't know how to do links. And so then I sent it to him, and then he responded, and he's like, I don't understand these last two lines, because it sounded, the last two lines were like academic jargon. And he's like, I don't understand that. And so he's like, what do you mean by this? And so he sent it back.
Yep.
And then I fixed it, and ever since then, he hasn't. Everything I sent, he was very generous, and sometimes I was very late. Because the issue goes out Wednesday morning. Sometimes I send an issue at like 2 a.m. That Wednesday morning. Because I'm sitting there like writing, and and so I wish there was a time I was writing much more regularly, and then life took a toll. But it was just really interesting being in conversation with Glen, and Glen gave the rare compliments, and so every time I get one, which was not a lot. Right, but I knew he liked the stuff, but he never said this was good. But every once in a while, he'd be like, "That was a nice piece. That was a nice piece." So.
Yeah.
So that, to me, that would make my week, because I hold him in such esteem. He's one of the smartest people in the world to me, and I don't think people understand that. Just this sharp mind, and just his ability to take in information. And I always ask him, like, how do you know everything that's going on all over the world? Like, what are you reading? Because I'm just like, I can't keep up. Like the details of things, from Eritrea to like the details of what's going on in Haiti right after the coup against Aristide, the different players. And so I'm just like, he must be reading everything all the time. So, but it's also one thing to read something, it's another to have that sharp political analysis, right? And the no sentimentality, it's just like, I have academic friends who are like, well, yeah, but they're just too mean at the Black Agenda Report. And I'm just like, well, forget your feelings. Whatever, So I appreciated the ability to say what we needed to say. And I learned from you all, because I think this is right before Danny came on. So I was like reading Bruce, Margaret, and Glen all the time. And Margaret was just so succinct. straight to the point. And so as an academic, I had to really learn to write like that, but also to have like the biting words, the turns of phrases that Glen always had. That I don't know, I can't imagine seeing that anytime in our lifetime, and he's just such a brilliant man. And and he didn't have to be nice. And that's the one thing I appreciated, this idea, because in academia, you can't be, people are always like, well, you have to be not disrespectful, but you have to listen to all sides, and you have to be, I can't think of the word, but the word that you have to be like, you have to be nice in your critiques. Right? And so that means you always have to temper your critiques. And I just appreciated the no holds barred that Black Agenda report all of you all had, just straightforward, especially when it came to Obama. And I have to say, the white left in particular was they hid behind Black Agenda report during the Obama years, because that's the only way they could critique Obama without being called crazy. I remember that as well. So.
That's I didn't mind giving them cover. Actually, it was.
Hold on one second. There's an echo. It might be on your side. Hold on one second, Dr. Pierre. I'm just gonna mute her. Okay, it went. So when you want to speak, Jemima, just unmute.
Okay. All right, good. Where was I? I forgot my thought. I'm getting over
giving cover to the white.
Thank you so much. Yeah, there was so much. The Obama mania was so awful, and no one could criticize him. I don't remember any politician where it was forbidden to criticize them, and because some of the criticism was racist. So anybody, I used to joke that Obama paid people like Rush Limbaugh because they made it safe for him to say or do anything, and no one felt comfortable, or few people felt comfortable saying anything, especially for white people, because they would be called racist if they ever criticized him. So I was kind of happy. I was like, fine, you want to, use us to help you out, great, as long as you have the same politics and you're saying the same thing. But that was a very difficult time. It's so long ago now. But we're seeing something like it. You always see something like that when there's a Democrat in the White House, where, what do you want? And then with Trump, oh my God, it's like, what do you want, Trump? So Biden probably could get away with more than Obama, as bad as he was. But one of the things I appreciated, you're absolutely right, Jemima, Glen was a voracious reader. I mean, he knew history, he knew current events. He could tell you something about just about anywhere in the world. Yeah. And his reporting on Haiti, Black Agenda Report, we did the best reporting on Haiti of any publication in the country. I can say that without any exaggeration, without any hesitation. No one did Haiti reporting like Black Agenda Report. Glen led the way. He always invited other people, yourself and others, to write about Haiti, so that this narrative of it's the poorest country in the hemisphere, and which means if it's the problem, it's those Black people who can't run a country, not the French stealing money for over 100 years, not the United States stealing money, not putting puppets in power, not the oligarchs who run the place, not the core group of thieves, the US and Canada and Europe, controlling Haiti, not the UN. And Black Agenda Report provided that clarity on Haiti and on other issues that got short shrift, if any, attention. And that is something that we can all be proud of. But I wanted to say something else. I think part of the reason Glen was such a keen observer and analyst, he was a very serious socialist, very, very serious.
Yes, very serious.
So he had that point of view, that lens through which he saw the world. And it made for very, very sharp clarity in any issue that he covered or anything that Black Agenda Report did. When I first met him, I thought I was a leftist. I wasn't. I was just like a run-of-the-mill Democrat. But anyway, so I learned quite a lot from him. He would always write something. I was like, I didn't know that. And then I'd be kind of embarrassed. It's like, should I have known that? So those are all of the reasons that he will be missed. And his voice, his literal voice, was so beautiful. It was tailor-made for radio, for broadcasting. His father was a DJ and radio host in Georgia, and he was on the radio as a kid, and you could tell. So I just wanted to add that to the things that you mentioned, Jemima.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, I'll never. This is Glen Ford. It's just like that booming, booming voice. I wanted to add, Margaret, that he was also an internationalist, and I think,
oh my gosh,
this is, and then especially around the Obama years, where Black folks just stopped thinking about they felt that they were part of the nation. So many Black people in this country who used to have critiques of U.S. empire. Just let it go, and stop talking about Africa. They stopped talking about the Caribbean. And all the drone wars, right? Not drone wars, the drone bombings, that was taken up by Obama. All of that stuff, they just let him get away with all of it. And it was Black Agenda Report, and, that just kept, the global world, especially the global Black world, and especially Haiti, like in focus. Haiti and certain parts of the African continent, I think. So we have to also remember that, because I just think, we've lost that. I feel like Obama was such a turn back for Black people in this country. We've lost our edge, And I remember him and you used to say, Black America used to be the moral compass, right, for the U.S., and they're the most radical constituency, but that got lost in Obama. And so I just wanted to really stress the internationalism of Glen, because I think that's also very important, and also changing the language, because I think we, the way we work in Black Agenda Report, just the language that people use, comes from Black Agenda Report. Bruce Dixon's sheepdogging, misleadership class, and my personal favorite is, the Democrats and Obama. They're not just the lesser evil; they're the more effective evil, and we see that, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. When you were speaking earlier, Jemima, about your interactions with him submitting articles, I was even looking at old emails today, and he did the same thing, because I wasn't as deep in academia as you were when I first came out, but I was like, I graduated from undergrad, and all I had written was undergraduate papers, and you don't really learn to write in academia. You learn how to write for a certain purpose to a very select audience. And he was always very clear, even though, after a while, once he gets a sense of your style and how you like to do things, he's not gonna, nitpick about your choices. But yeah, he was just so encouraging and so so simple in his explanations. I mean, I don't know, just politically and just how he carried himself in the movement. I mean, the ability to explain phenomenon, all of it, to teach people in a way that's so concise, so grounded in theory and history, and as you all said, internationalism and deep principles of socialism and communism. I mean, he would tell me stories about how in the 60s, he was a military guy. He witnessed Black people refusing to go to Washington, D.C. and put down the rebellions in D.C. after Martin Luther King was assassinated. He witnessed that as in the military. And then he also was a communist. So he was like passing out the Daily Worker, and he was like getting harassed by cops and he would tell these stories, and it's obvious that he had so much practical experience, and that his journalism, his talents in journalism and in writing and analysis and radio, all of it for him was a gift for the people now. It wasn't his way of trying to make some career to rake in millions. And I said this before you came on, Jemima, that he could have easily been a Black media mogul. He was pioneering Black media in so many areas: hip hop, radio, right after the Black Liberation, during the Black Liberation movement's destruction, as he was a Panther himself. It's just one of these incredible lives that that someone lived, which teach us so much. But obviously, because of his politics, there was such a huge pushback, and he, as well as all of us at Black Agenda Report, have done our best to really fight against that grain, that real intense response to a real revolutionary response to these crises, all of them, domestic, international. I mean, he really did change the language, and he contributed not just a deep breadth of work, but also, in my opinion, he was a theoretician, so much so that, as you said, Jemima, he, like the term Black misleadership class, for example, his analysis of the Sanders phenomenon, his analysis of international issues. I mean, I've had dozens of hours of conversations with him about China. I can't say how much I've learned just from talking to him about these things and thinking about what's going to happen in the next several years. And just, that was just the person he was. And it's just so, it was just so humbling to be able to learn from someone like him. And it is going to be really hard to move forward without him. But I know we're gonna do our best to
we are. It is going to be different. It's passings are always difficult, and when someone like Glen was the driving force behind Black Agenda Report, but you both mentioned Bruce, and he's the one who first started calling Bernie Sanders a sheepdog. He was just going to sheepdog people into the Democratic Party, which turned out to be the case. So we have these giants whose shoulders we stand on, and as this generation goes, as is inevitable, these people he was a Vietnam era vet, he was a Black Panther. The people who had those experiences are aging and passing, and there was a gap because of the destruction of the movement of a couple generations. There are younger folks coming up who want to step in, and we need the yin and the yang. We do need these young people who read Black Agenda Report, who join Black Alliance for Peace. All of these organizations, there are people who want to organize and who have a radical focus, an African-centered focus, and as well as being internationalist too, as you have said. So those are pretty big shoes to fill, but we're going to do our best to fill them, and Black Agenda Report is going to go onward. It's I would not ever want to see it disappear. So we're going to have the challenge of transitions, but I learned so much from Glen about, and I wanted to say something else. He was always very encouraging. I started Black Commentator. I wrote a letter about Condoleezza Rice, as I recall. And I said, can I write this letter? He said, okay. And I said, then he's like, you want to write some more? Like, I wasn't a professional writer, no journalism school. In fact, he would say things like journalism schools are crap. He said, all they should do is teach people how to write. The rest of it is all pro-state propaganda. But at any rate, and that's an important lesson for all of us, to be in solidarity with each other and to encourage each other as we all strive to learn new things.
And I think you're absolutely right. And I want to say, Glen could hold his own anywhere, everywhere. I'm telling you, he's one of the smartest people I know. And as you know, Margaret, he came, we invited him, and you remember when we did our Black Folks in Dark Time at Vanderbilt University. And then when my partner Peter's book came out, he came and gave a talk in honor of the book at UCLA. And so I do think, I think of him as such a great mind, but also, you're absolutely right, extremely generous, extremely kind, and that's one thing. Kind in person, not kind in the words when he's critical, but that's fine. We don't need to be kind when we're being critical of a system that's out to kill us. So, so that's one thing I learned. It's just like, you can be clear and rough on that system that's trying to kill you, but you can also be a kind person. So I just wanted to stress that because he could hold his own, and I appreciated that so great, so a lot, quite a bit.
Yeah, no, it's true. He was very generous. I mean, he always had my back, and it didn't always please people that he had my back. There are always questions. I write for Black Agenda Report, but I'm not a Black American, and all of this. But he was always very clear. The Black radical tradition is inclusive to the struggles of all oppressed people, and that Black Agenda Report would remain firmly under Black leadership, no matter who contributed. So he was very clear about that. And no matter what others would say, whatever confrontations I would get in, he was always so encouraging and would just be, with all of his wealth of experience. I mean, I've had so many opportunities to learn from so many incredible revolutionaries, including yourselves. But like with Glen, because I got to know him so personally, I really got to learn from just how he was so able to just maintain his composure and his confidence and his ability to stand up for the people and to continuously perfect his craft and work hard and the discipline and all of it. I mean, I was just so lucky to be able to bear witness to that and to learn from it. And politically, I mean, there's just few others that I've ever met who are as principled as him and who can adapt. I mean, just the way in which just reading his work and then talking with him about something like Bernie Sanders or Black Lives Matter, for example, and seeing how he could both understand the strategic situation and address people who obviously are becoming interested in socialism and in radical politics and thinking in terms of race and racism again, while at the same time always knowing who the scoundrels were, who had to be called out, who had to be targeted. When Bernie Sanders, was sheepdogging, as Bruce Dixon would call it, he was talking about the contradictions and how the people who were following Bernie Sanders needed to break from the Democratic Party. When Black Lives Matter Network, you all remember when they were approaching the Democratic Party, even when they were just leaning in to a kind of posturing with the Democratic Party, we were all following his lead in his criticisms of the Black Lives Matter Network. And he took so much pride in knowing that Black Agenda Report played a huge role in Black Lives Matter in their rejection of a DNC endorsement. They, in 2016, refused to endorse the DNC. And in part, that was because Black Agenda Report did make a huge fuss about it. We were all writing about how this is problematic. I had personal experiences in Boston, very negative, where people were talking about Glen Ford and Bruce Dixon as they're like Al Sharptons. And it was so just awful. And I would tell Glen Ford, and he's like, oh, well, I know those people. Don't worry. That's to be expected. We're going to keep doing the work. And that kind of approach was just both humbling and so educational. And so there's so much to learn. I mean, he really did follow the words of the great Amilcar Cabral when he said, tell no lies, claim no easy victories. Glen Ford followed that to the T, all the way up until the end of his life.
Yeah. Do you guys, I have to quickly say, do you remember in the 2016 elections when Trump won and he was at the Real News Network watching party? You guys don't remember that?
Didn't see it, but go ahead.
They were so mad at him because everyone around him, leftists, were so upset. They were getting so upset that Hillary was losing. And Glenn was like, well, what's going to change? What's going to change? If Trump wins, tell me what's going to change, for American empire, what's going. And they, I remember one person getting up and walking out of the room when it was announced that it was too close to call. And so he maintained composure. And he just kept to his words, even though he was the most hated person in that room at the time. And you can feel it. It was palpable. And I'll never forget that, because he stood his ground, and he was right. He was on the right side of things. And so I'll never forget just how much venom was thrown at him at that evening when Trump defeated Hillary, and how much he stood his ground, because a lot of people would have wilted and said, well, no, this is, I see what you're saying, but he was like, he kept the conversation straightforward, and he made his point. So to me, that's something I need to learn to get, not to get too ruffled by these people who can be so angry and in their liberalism, right? And keep it moving, as long as you're on the righteous, go in the righteous direction. Yeah.
You're right. He you reminded me of something else that happened at Black Commentator. What he did was initially stopped Cory Booker from winning his first mayoral election in Newark. He knew, he said to himself, where did this guy come from? Where does his money come from? And this is like sort of early days of internet. He told me he went to the library. He's like, oh, he got money from the Manhattan Institute. Oh, he got money from the Bradley Foundation, all this right-wing money. And people campaigning for his opponent, the Sharp James, I almost forgot his name, former mayor of Newark, they were handing out on the street the Black Commentator analysis of that election. And Black Commentator kept Cory Booker from winning that first time he ran. And the weaknesses of Sharp James helped him to win. Now he's in the Senate, but it was Black Commentator who stopped him, and who have stayed on Cory Booker, and we always will, as long as he's in the Senate, he's in public life anywhere. We will analyze those people. Black Agenda Report, we had the CBC Monitor, Congressional Black Caucus Monitor, Letitia Stills. We rated all the members of the Black Caucus. We were not happy that there were X number of Black people in Congress. What were those Black people doing? We felt that people needed to know. And the coining of the term Black Misleadership class, people quote it all the time. And I've noticed also, I didn't realize that we're quoted academically. My name pops up in play. I was like, well, I didn't know people were, quoting me from Black Agenda Report, all of us, I guess. So it's important to know the real world. Some people try to say it's, you're just an academic, you're a theoretician, you just talk about stuff, but it has real consequences. Our work has had real life consequences in this country politically.
Yeah, and I've heard this criticism of Black Agenda Report, and it drives me up the wall, really, about the academic nature of it. We're just talking about it, we're not doing it. First of all of us have been involved in political struggle in one way or the other. That's just one thing. That just shows how little people know of the people who are producing the work at Black Agenda Report. But then it's like, obviously they don't read Black Agenda Report or listen to Black Agenda Report, because if you did, who are the majority of Glen Ford's guests on the radio program? Oh, they were activists in the movement, in the struggle, talking about what they were working on and having real political conversations, not just what are you guys doing and what reporting on their issues. No, asking them questions about what they thought about the world and why they were doing what they were doing. I mean, that to me is the heart of political education. And I think the way that Glen Ford led Black Agenda Report was always rooted in the people. It was always rooted in how people were struggling against empire, how they were struggling against capitalist exploitation, against white supremacy. It's so clear if you are actually following it. But of course, to detractors, it's quite easy when the politics are not in agreement, as you were saying, Jemima, about the real news, for example, and those folks getting angry at him during the watch party. I know they were deeply close to Glen Ford, a lot of staff over there, but of course, when it comes to just how hegemonic liberalism really is on the left, Glen Ford is going to ruffle your feathers somewhere, on some issue. I mean, for me, he was the one who exposed me to what was happening in Libya when the U.S. was gearing up to invade Libya through NATO. He traveled, he went there on a delegation, and he had so many insights about what that whole intervention was about, a monumental one that was occurring during Occupy Wall Street. It was a real watershed moment in modern U.S. history. And a lot of people were very unhappy with Black Agenda Report's stance. So much so, to this day, you have these so-called faux socialists protesting people like Ajamu Baraka because he stands up for Syria. And he went to Syria with Glen Ford to show solidarity with the Syrian people against U.S. aggression. Anyway, and the same goes for Haiti and anywhere where the U.S. is seeking to destroy other countries for the benefit of the ruling class. So anyway, I'll just leave it there.
I just want to say quickly, it's because of Libya that Democracy Now! Stopped inviting Glen Ford, in addition to the way he tore down Michael Eric Dyson, which is my favorite debate of all time, which is now making the rounds again on the internet. But you notice he hasn't been on Amy Goodman's show for a very long time, and he has he was telling us a special story about that over drinks one day, but I can't say it online. But part of that is, he even got too radical for the supposed left, right? Like some people within the left, and he hasn't been back, to that show. He hasn't been invited back to that in a long time, and it has to do with Libya. Has to do with certain positions, and also has to do with the fact that he tore down some beloved, liberals, Black liberals, so.
Well, it's funny what you say about Democracy Now! Is now unwatchable. I'll just say it. They were on the side of the destruction of Libya. They have sided with the destruction of the attempt to do the same to Syria. And they don't cover, for example, there is evidence, excellent evidence, that the Assad government has not used poison gas against people. There are whistleblowers in the OPCW, the organization that investigates chemical weapons. But Amy Goodman refuses to do that reporting, just like the New York Times or the Washington Post or MSNBC. And all these things that we've been talking about, these are watershed events. I remember in 2008, during the Wall Street crash, I remember one of the first times I did public speaking, and I was terrible, but Glen kept encouraging me. Anyway, I remember him saying, and this event was at the Malcolm and Betty Shabazz Center at the Audubon Center uptown. And I remember him saying the stock market crash was a crack in time. And he said it was a watershed moment, and talked about it in ways I had not thought about it. And it explained why the crisis of capitalism and the need for this system to try to defend itself by destroying those nations that were independent. So you understood it better if you read about it in Black Agenda Report. And that's the thing about a crisis. It separates the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. So then you know who's really left and who really is just a liberal. So no, we'll not be back on Democracy Now!, but that's okay.
Yeah, no, Democracy Now! Has been carrying water for imperialism, and Glen Ford, or any of us, none of us. I mean, anyone who is committed to the struggle for liberation in any sense of the term cannot go along with that. And these aren't choices. I mean, anyone can have us on. I mean, anyone can have could have had Glen Ford on, Margaret, myself, anyone. We're not here to reject opportunities to expose people to our ideas, but at the end of the day, there were calculated decisions made because of the way that Black Agenda Report decided and was led by someone like Glen Ford, who put politics over personalities, who put politics over any kind of career opportunities. Black Agenda Report is a movement vehicle. It's an organ for the movement. It's not for people to make money off of. It's not for anyone to build huge clout off of. It's the ideas that are in Black Agenda Report, what is covered in Black Agenda Report, is for the broader goal of moving people forward in a revolutionary direction, and to both preserve and to give new life to what has always been the thrust of revolutionary politics in the United States and much of the world for that matter, which is Black politics. And to really be able to, what I always knew hurt, I mean, it hurts all of us, but I knew it hurt Glen and Bruce. I know it hurts all of us, the way that the Black left has been so desecrated and attacked and then molded and co-opted. You know, Glen Ford often cited in his articles, under Obama, Black people became more conservative about war and peace, issues of war and peace, something that is unheard of than white people, right? Around the question of Syria, there was more support for that proposed intervention in 2013 than ever before among the Black community. And I knew that hurt him a lot because, I mean, he grew up. He grew up in that struggle, and but at the same time, he wasn't going to set an example where we would capitulate to that. And I think that is one of the greatest gifts that you can give to humanity, is that kind of strength, that kind of leadership. And yeah, we all have so much to really learn and take from that.
Yeah, I have to say this also about Glen. Glen loved Black people. He was not one for respectability politics. He defended us, even though there were individuals he was not respecting of, people who no one should respect. But he respected Black people. He loved Black people. And so it hurt him, you're right, to see Black people who, I remember when Ronald Reagan tried to kill Gaddafi, Black people thought it was a terrible thing. And Barack Obama did kill him and did not lose any support amongst Black people. And he said to me once that we used to have this exception. And he reminded me when the Iranian students took hostages in the US Embassy, and it's a long time ago, but they let the Black people go. There were Black Marines, some Black employees there. And he said, we've lost that. We've lost our exemption. And after Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice, and then Barack Obama, and he said it jokingly, but it was true that we would become the face of empire and the defender of empires, because we thought in terms of of the days of segregation. To see a Black person in a high place, the Black face in a high place, was the most important thing. And so that it was considered not important what they did. But he didn't spare anybody, and he was consistent. He was consistent in his politics with everyone.
Right. Yeah. We'll be on for another 20 or so minutes, and I definitely want to get Dr. Pierre's take more on Haiti, because I feel like there's so much to talk about. Just to give a brief analysis of the goings on, the big issues relating to the assassination of Jovenel Moïse and all of the developments that have occurred since then. But yeah, to just follow up on that, Glen Ford would often tell me, because yes, I am a non-Black person, I'm Vietnamese descent, and we would always talk about the importance of Black nationalism. He would always say, do not underestimate the strength of Black nationalism and the contention and the debate and the struggle around it. And he gave, just the master class he gave me in being able to navigate that and be able to put forward a politics of internationalism while navigating those very difficult debates that were happening, that became only more difficult because of the way that the ruling class wielded the influence of Barack Obama and the Black misleadership class to forward their ends, to forward a certain kind of nationalism that was really anathema to liberation of anybody, no less Black people. So he was always keeping his ear to the ground. He was not interested in talking about politics and history if it was detached from the reality of our particular situation. And I think that is what differentiates revolutionaries from those who are only interested in reforms, who are liberals. They are more interested in ideas for ideas' sake. They are interested in ideas for different goals, apart and detached, oftentimes from the reality of people. Because if that weren't the case, then how could someone take the position, for example, that the U.S. should be waging humanitarian interventions anywhere in Libya and Syria, that we shouldn't oppose it vocally, or that we should oppose humanitarian interventions, but we should also condemn the Syrian government or the Libyan government or whatever we're talking about, whatever government we're talking about that the U.S. doesn't like at the same time, right? We couldn't hold those positions if those who are taking them weren't just thinking of ideas for their own sake, weren't just looking at politics as an exercise in their own popularity or their own brand or identity. No, Glen Ford was not about branding and identity. He was about what was the revolutionary trajectory that was needed to bring about a mass movement which could begin this process, which is always in process, of tearing down this system and building a new one. That, to me, is just one of the most important lessons I think Glen Ford really imparts to all of us.
I definitely agree, definitely. And so, we can switch to talking about Haiti if you want a bit. Part of the thing, I learned a lot from Glen, just focusing on Haiti. One of the things that that Glen did that a lot of people didn't do was really focus on 2004 and the coup d'etat that led to this moment, and really, showed with Bush how, the French, the Canadians, and the Americans cooked up a plan and basically, cooked up this plan and then funded all these paramilitaries to go into Haiti and do the coup against Aristide. So I appreciated that because he knew, he could see what was happening from within. And this is long before the WikiLeaks files were released, where now we know exactly what was going on. But he could read into, the fact that, they sent Aristide away. They didn't even let him stay in the Western Hemisphere. They threatened Jamaica. They threatened Venezuela, who offered asylum. They sent him back to Africa, right? And then they brought in this dude who had not lived in Haiti for 30 years and made him president. And I remember reading one article from Glen calling, the fat man from Florida showed up, as like the puppet of the US UN puppet. So, it's important. And this is a good segue to talk about Haiti, because what's going on right now with the assassination is what people who are anti-imperialists are saying. Well, we don't want any intervention, we don't want any occupation, and so on. And so what I wanted to do is really talk about the fact that Haiti is under occupation. And I think we need to remember that, because everything that happens in Haiti is because we're under occupation. And the occupation is very different this time because it was done under a multinational, multiracial group of people, right? So it was started by the US, the UN, the Canada in 2004, right? And then where they, the military, the guys landed, went to Aristide's house and told him he had to get on a plane, and then they shipped him out. And then the U.S., France, and Canada went to the UN Security Council and basically declared Haiti a chaotic, as a war zone. And the UN Security Council went along, right? And that's something we have to think about, because China and Russia are in the UN Security Council. And then you have this, thousands of military police show up in Haiti in June 2004, led by Brazil, right? The military was led by Brazil, and they had this occupation, right? The UN occupation of Haiti, which people don't think about. It transforms the notion of what occupation is, because it makes it seem like it's not the US. That's it, right? Like we can talk about the 1915 occupation, but this one was like, allowed by the UN. The UN gave the US cover for a coup d'etat in Haiti because it came in, and you had all kinds of nations, right? Because you had Africans, you had, all kinds of soldiers from Africa, soldiers from Latin America. And it looked like they were doing this humanitarian stuff when the reality is the UN was giving cover to a coup d'etat. And so I think Haiti is always a very good case for thinking about how the US will work, how the US moves forward, because it hides the US part, the US role in it. And it makes this, at first, all the leaders of the UN occupation were like Europeans, the military run by Brazil. And then later on, they changed the face of the leadership. You have like members of the Caribbean community being part of the UN mission. So that shows you how occupation goes, and then we can hide it and transform the terms. And so, 2017, the occupation, a lot of the soldiers left, but there's this, the UN office, the BINU, are the same ones, the core group that we've been talking about quite a bit, are the same ones that make the decisions for Haiti, and they're the ones that pick the latest president, the latest prime minister, and so on. So what I want to say about Haiti is that whatever is happening under occupation. And it's because of that occupation that the last 10 years have been terrible. And the other thing I wanted to say is that what's happening now is a legacy of the Obama administration. And people don't want to talk about it because the PHTK, the party, Moise's party, and his predecessor, Michel Martelly, are Obama's gift. The party emerged under Obama. Hillary Clinton left the Middle East during the so-called Arab Spring. I call it so-called because it happened on the African continent. As far as I'm concerned, it's the African Spring, but hey. So they left, she left that area, flew to Haiti, and forced Martelly onto the ballot with the OAS when he did not even make the first round of the elections. And this is where you have the emergence of this political party, a bunch of crooks, and corrupt folks that serve the oligarchy, the light-skinned elite in Haiti, as well as the US government. And the past 10 years, this is what we've been living under. And this is Obama's gift. And as Black people in this country, we should be so upset at this man that gave cover to empire for really putting Haiti in the situation that it's in right now. So.
Yeah, I thank you for pointing out, you pointed out so many important things there. Russia and China finally saw the light. It took that. It took Libya. They went along. They could have saved Libya if Russia and China had, because they have their permanent Security Council members, they could have vetoed the no-fly zone resolution, but they went along, and I think they were sorry later. They stopped doing it with Syria, but a lot of damage was done. They realized they can't make friends with these people. Now they're under attack. So then it was the United States overthrew the elected Ukrainian government right next door to Russia. I mean, how gangster can you be? So you're pointing out some important things, that if other countries had stood up for themselves and stood up for what was right, a lot of damage to many countries would not have been done. So I thank you for pointing out what Brazil did. That was Lula doing that. I hope he wins against Bolsonaro, but that does not mean that he gets a free pass in helping take the lead and giving cover to U.S. intervention and occupation there. So I had a question for you. So what is the latest? So there is a new president, a new prime minister. What is the latest from Haiti?
Well, the latest is that our white rulers are ruling us, right? And so there are two things that happened. So right after the assassination, which I think was an inside job, in which I think there's nothing that happens in Haiti without the State Department and the core group knowing. So I'm sure they knew about it. They knew it was going to happen, and they know what's happened. But I think this investigation will never know, because the FBI took all kinds of stuff. The chief of police who's running the investigation, no one trusts, because they think he could be part of it. And so, you've got people. It's like the police investigating themselves, right? Like here, during like the George Floyd killing or whatever killing, police brutality issue, happening, or the FBI, the CIA investigating itself, right? So there's that. But what happened was right after, Moise was ruling by decree, and a lot of people, so his mandate had been up February 7, 2021. And before that, groups of Haitian opposition, civil society, a lot of them, we have to say they're the bourgeois opposition, because the real, and I have to be honest about that, because the real people on the ground don't have access to a lot of these conversations. But there was an opposition that set up a transition for Haiti. The US government, as soon as Biden got into power, affirmed Moise's mandate for another year. So went against the Haitian group, all the groups on the ground, the bourgeois opposition, and basically supported Moise. And so they supported Moise against everyone. Remember, there were protests in March, in April, all these protests, which would have led to regime change calls if they were happening in Cuba, right? Yep. But so it's true, right? So the protests and so on. And so right before, and then Moise wanted to change the constitution, right, to allow him to do another term. The Haitian constitution does not allow more than one, consecutive terms like the police, but also to give him immunity and so on. So he wanted to change the constitution, and he wanted to have elections. And people in Haiti are saying, no, this is an undemocratic government. You cannot have elections where everybody's appointed. There's no elected members. There are, I think, 10 left, but they're mostly of his party. Everything else, the parliament is dissolved. He fired Supreme Court justices and so on. So no one wanted these elections, but the OAS, which is, the lapdog, as Cuba would call them, of the US, went and met with Moise a few days before the assassination, and basically comes out of the meeting and said, we've met with Moise and we're going to go ahead with these elections. We support him. We're going to provide, help, but under these conditions, he has to appoint another prime minister, because the one he had was interim. That was his 6th prime minister. And he had to appoint another prime minister and so on. So Moise designated this other guy named Ariel Henry, who was supposed to take the position of prime minister from Claude Joseph, who was the interim prime minister. But Ariel Henry was part of the 2004 coup that, a group of Haitians that actually gave cover to the 2004 coup, right? So that's a whole other conversation. But anyways, Claude Joseph, when Moise was assassinated, Claude Joseph was still interim, and it was the day right after his term ended, and he declares himself prime minister, like in charge of the government. And immediately, our white rulers, the core group, says, okay, Claude Joseph is the new prime minister and will lead Haiti to elections, right? And people were protesting that. But then I guess people protested so much that they had a change of heart. And so while Haitian civil society, like 300 people meeting, to say we need our own solution, to the crisis on July 17th. It's the same day during the meeting that the UN and the core group released a statement saying that Ariel Henry, the guy that was supposed to become the new prime minister appointed, would lead Haiti to democracy. So they basically undercut whatever civil society was doing, and they handpicked this guy. They said he would lead the country, and then they said he would. And then immediately he said he's going to name his cabinet on Tuesday. And he was sworn in on Tuesday against the wishes of everybody in Haiti, except for, you have the comprador bourgeoisie who allow this, right? Like you have these people who have low self-esteem, self-hating Black bourgeoisie who know that the US runs things. And so they've been able to navigate that to vie for power. But so that's where we are right now. So we are in a space where you still have the oppositions, the large groups meeting. They completely condemn the UN role in establishing a prime minister for Haiti without any Haitian say. But the US is going ahead as if there's a new government in Haiti. So we are, Haiti's a colony. Haiti is there's no neo to it. It's a colony that's being run by, through indirect rule, as far as I can see, right? And it's not even that indirect, because the UN, which supposedly its mission is over, the core group was not an elected group. They make these decisions, and the US State Departments affirm these decisions.
Wow. Yes.
And we should all be outraged.
Indeed, we should. On here, I don't get outraged, but I can tell you that every day I'm outraged. But we should all be outraged by the crimes. I mean, these are war crimes that are happening to Haiti. And we spoke about the international situation, and I think maybe this should be our last question before closing remarks. We commented earlier about the international situation. It was a lot more delicate. I think there's this underestimation of just how difficult the 21st century has been for the world under US hegemony, and how Barack Obama really was this more effective evil and created very difficult situations for these bigger countries who were still relatively weak, China, Russia. But even during the Bush years, these countries were pretty weak. China was just beginning to become an industrial power. Russia was nowhere close to an industrial power. And at that time, the US really did have so much influence that even countries where it wasn't in their interest to go along with these actions against Haiti, they went along, because what would happen if they did not? Well, we see what happens to countries when they do not follow the US line. They get sanctioned or they get invaded themselves. So it just speaks to how reactionary the international situation was and still is, and how Glen Ford's leadership in this way to really point that out, how the Obama administration pushed that to its climax. And now we're seeing, I think, a different situation. I want to get your thoughts about this, Dr. Pierre, about how it seems like after 8 years of Obama, where the US kind of came to a climax with its unmitigated hegemony and destruction. And the Obama administration came on the heels of the 07-08 economic crisis, and then all of its interventions, right? And the US conducted a lot of interventions under Obama, military interventions. They ended up all producing their own kind of crises. We see it on the African continent after Libya, and in the Middle East, in the Arab and African worlds, this huge refugee crisis and instability and chaos. Somebody mentioned in the comments the neo-Nazis put into power in Ukraine, the ongoing colonization of Haiti, on and on and on. Venezuela, the sanctions, right? With so many instances of just these crises that really, I think, was very educational for so many. Black Agenda Report was one of the few US-based outlets that were understanding this. But where do you see the international situation? Do you see any optimism moving forward? Because Haiti definitely falls within this broader anti-imperialist struggle. I mean, a lot of these protests, especially in 2018, were over the way that Venezuela's solidarity to Haiti, those funds, how those were used in a very corrupt manner to the behest of the oligarchs. How do you see this next period and Haiti's role in it? Because I feel like Haiti has a huge place in this broader shift in a more anti-imperialist direction globally.
Yes, I think Haiti is a model for us to understand. I think we really need to understand the way that the imperial machinations in Haiti work, because we can see them trying to be replicated in other places. And so if we don't understand how that the UN can be deployed for cover for the US, we should know that now. So for example, Kofi Annan was the Secretary General of the UN, and he said after the coup d'etat, Haiti is clearly unable to sort itself out, and leaving it alone would be worsening the chaos. This is what he used for the UN intervention. So when you have places like that see Haiti as chaos and don't see anything else, then you have to be worried about, as empire is falling. Right? I mean, this is the last gasp of empire. That's the one thing we have to remember. And so the one thing that gives me hope is, the shifting views of people, especially in Latin America. I mean, I'm watching the Peruvian, installation of Castillo. I see, the fact that Bolivia was able to get rid of reverse the coup, which is unusual. but I do start, in Mexico going against the blockade and sending shipments to Cuba, Russia sending shipments to Cuba. So I think in Latin America, we do see that. And I just hope that they see Haiti as, a place to look to, in the fight against imperialism, because we cannot do that alone. I do worry about the increasing militarization of the African continent, and also the African Union being run by a bunch of comprador bourgeoisie who don't think about imperialism in the way that I think they should. And so I'm both hopeful and weary, because I'm not sure. And I do think with Haiti, the dissemination of information about Haiti is so terrible, right? I mean, even leftists like Raoul Peck, called for intervention in 2004. Let's say this, right? It was these Black elite intellectuals and artists, Haitians themselves, who were so against the Black poor in Haiti that allow for this intervention. And we cannot let them forget that as they're complaining now. And so we have to remember, we have to think about the ways that empire has been able to use so many of us, right, in its wake. And we have to figure out a way to create solutions that both point to, we have to learn, and this is where Glen comes into play, right? Read a lot and know, because we have to hone in our analysis, because without the analysis, we cannot act and we cannot make moves. And so I think learning about what happened to Haiti from 2004 to now will actually open up the way for us to understand the way that empire is acting as it's dying, right? And it's gonna come back for us, and so we have to be ready for it.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. You are so correct. I mean, first of all, thank you, Dr. Pierre, for coming on, Jemima. You're just a wealth of knowledge, especially about this issue where there is a real shortage of especially here in the United States. The Haitian diaspora has a legacy of struggle here in the United States. That's for sure. But in terms of how far politics have shifted to the right, just generally, there is this shortage of those who can really articulate what's going on, and in the spirit of Glen, with that analysis, be able to point us in a. And
it's our job to keep Black Agenda Report going, to keep doing these analyses, because there's no outlet for them, right? And so we need to keep that analysis, and we need to keep it going, because the way that we all learn from Black Agenda Report, from Black commentators, the way that we hope the next generation will keep learning, and because that's the only way we can fight it. We have to fight ideologically as well, right? We have to fight propaganda.
Definitely. Margaret, I want to kick it to you, because I think we're going to close. Any closing thoughts?
I want to repeat. I want to thank you, Jemima. It's been a rough couple of days for us all, anybody who knew and loved Glen Ford, but we all decided to come on and make him a big part of this segment tonight. So I just want to say thank you, and thank Glen, because I wouldn't know either one of you.
That's true.
Without my that connection that I have with Glen. So yes, Black Agenda Report will go on, and it's conversations like this which give us all the inspiration and the energy to move ahead. We have started something very, very important. People need us, and I know it seems immodest, but the world needs us, needs our point of view, because there are so many institutions working against us, the corporate media, who parrot the state, we have to have these voices. And for people, you mentioned WikiLeaks, they have Julian Assange locked up because he told the truth about Haiti and so many other places around the world. They try to literally criminalize our work. So we all have a lot to be proud of. Grateful for Glen Ford's presence in our life and in our lives, and grateful for the work and the continued work of Black Agenda Report. So the future looks good for us, thanks to people like you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. We got to keep it going. Thank you so much for all your work and keeping it going. And we all have to step up. I promise to step up more, because we need more analysis.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's close there. Just everyone remember that all the work that we all are doing, just know that Glen Ford was really encouraging and really pushing from behind, and sometimes pulling us from ahead, a lot of the times pulling us from ahead to make all of this stuff happen. I mean, that's the truth. I mean, he was really a vanguard figure. They say he's an old revolutionary, old communist cliche, but the vanguard. He really was in the vanguard. And, it's just this program here. I mean, he was the most encouraging. He wanted Black Agenda Report on YouTube. Not everyone has time to do this. I was like, I'll make some time. And here we are trying to be on this platform despite all of the censorship and all of that. So continue to support us. I know that we're working out some logistical things. Death is not only hard emotionally, it is extremely hard logistically and administratively. The system does not make it easy all the way around. So a lot of news to come. There will be many more tributes, definitely, to Glen Ford, because there really isn't enough you could say about him if you knew him at all. And even if you didn't know him, I've had so many messages over the last few days who said that he was their mentor too, and they never got to meet him. So that's how much of an impact he really had. So anyway, it was great to be with all of you.
Same here. Remember, he was about the work, not the sentimentality. I appreciate that as well.
Yeah, seriously, definitely. And we will be back. Definitely, Dr. Pierre, we'll be in touch with you, and we'll definitely be back here sometime soon. So peace out, everyone.
Peace out. Take care.
Good night.